Hey guys, it's Asher. Rishi Sunak has been really busy over the weekend. First, he announced a £5 billion government grant scheme, and then he went and talked to Andrew Marr on his show. I wanted to really quickly talk about specifically what he announced and what he talked about and things he didn't talk about and didn't announce, and things that maybe we'll be able to see in the budget on Wednesday, and cover some crucial questions about the UK economy that nobody seems to be asking that I wanted to go and highlight. Now, first, let's talk about the grant that he announced yesterday on Sunday, the 28th of February. The government has decided to give another grant to help businesses through the next few months up until the period when maybe lockdowns are going to be actually easing. This will be a cash grant, and it will be available to as many as 650,000, according to Rishi Sunak, or 700,000 if you read every newspaper. Businesses, shops will get up to £6,000 each, and those in hospitality and the beauty sector will receive up to £18,000. These will be cash grants. They're not loans. They're one-off payments, and they're going to be based on the premises that you have. And these businesses will get them in order to be able to sustain the cost of running their business, their rents, etc., over the next 2 months. Now, trying to justify how they came up with these numbers, Rishi mentioned a few different stats, and the point is that these are meant to help primarily with rent payments because furlough is already covering staff, according to him. But here's the big problem that is probably hard to grasp. If he happened to be a very, very wealthy government minister who only ever has worked in giant hedge funds or Goldman Sachs. Small businesses have a huge number of costs other than rent and other than staff wages as well. And many of these businesses are bringing in absolutely zero revenue, yet these costs are still there. They don't just magically go away. The furlough scheme does help, like the Chancellor says, but unfortunately, the Chancellor probably is aware that it doesn't cover 100% of staff wages. So each week, these businesses that are completely shut and have no opportunity to trade, sure, some of them have found other ways, maybe doing delivery or something else, but a lot of them don't really have the capacity. These businesses are making absolutely nothing, yet they still have to go and pay part of the staff wages as well as all these other costs. And then there is the big problem that I don't see other people talking about at all. There are way more businesses in the UK that have suffered during this pandemic than just hotels, gyms, and restaurants, which seems to be the only set of industries that are getting all of these grants and all of this help. I know it's easy to focus only by providing support to businesses that people see on the high street because it's very easy. It's easy to see when those businesses close down. It affects people's perception of the economy, but there are so many other businesses that sit in the office above that shop that you can see that people don't see that are suffering in many cases just as much. If you are one of those businesses, you don't get any kind of suspension on business rates. You still have to continue paying them. That's right. You don't get any benefit on being able to get any cash grants or anything like that. You get absolutely no help other than the furlough for businesses who have had to suspend their employees. But if some employees are trying to rescue the business and working, then even that help is not available. Now, just because you're not a cafe or a shop or a restaurant does not mean that your business hasn't been affected, and in many cases affected a lot. And this is the one thing that I think is a big misstep in terms of the way the government is treating this, and in terms of the way that maybe some of the media are talking about it as well, because everyone's praising all these schemes but kind of forgetting that there's a huge number of self-employed small businesses with only one director and all these kind of companies that are getting absolutely nothing because nobody really sees them, and it's easy to go and forget about them as a result. Look around. In the UK, small businesses are being decimated. I have an office in a small space where there are 8 other businesses, small offices up to 10 or 20 people each, and 6 out of those businesses have already gone. And I would imagine that the other 2 are probably not doing particularly well. They certainly don't turn up to the office pretty much ever just to pick up the mail. And that is anecdotal, but I see loads of people. I know lots of people who have small businesses who are suffering, who are closing, who are going out of business. Yet this seems to be something that nobody really cares about. When talking to Andrew Marr, Rishi Sunak repeatedly refused to talk about taxes. Each time he got a question, he replied saying all updates would be revealed on Wednesday. I made some notes when I was watching it, and I think I counted at least 6 times when that happened. They were happening like pretty much every minute at the beginning of the interview. By the way, I will be doing live coverage of the budget on Wednesday, so if you're interested in what's going to be happening with that, make sure you tune in. Make sure you go and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and if you have, make sure you hit the bell also get the notification when that live stream starts. The two things that Rishi did mention in that interview are kind of interesting though, and I think didn't get enough attention in the media. First, he pretty much admitted that the digital services tax that was introduced last year in an attempt to tax online giants like Amazon failed. He didn't say it in those words. He said that now the government is beginning to work with other countries around the world to develop something based on the same principles, because you see, when you introduce one of these taxes, the companies that have to pay those taxes magically find ways of not paying them because they are based in other jurisdictions, blah blah blah. So when people ask whether companies have done very well out of the last year and whether those companies maybe should be paying some kind of windfall tax, I think the answer that we are hearing is that the government hasn't quite figured out a way, or maybe will not want to figure out a way of making some of those companies pay appropriate levels of tax, especially when those companies don't even pay the basic level of tax the local shop pays, let alone trying to charge them anything above that amount. Maybe just paying the normal amount of tax that they should be paying would be a great place to start. Anyway, he also mentioned later on in the program that the furlough scheme protected 9 to 10 million jobs. And I think that's probably kind of accurate in a way, because it kind of topped out around that number. But actually, I think it probably protected far more jobs, because some companies will only put part of their staff on furlough and the other staff still benefit from the furlough scheme, because that means that the company has been able to go and get the extra cash to pay for the furloughed staff. And that means the company doesn't go under, and that means that those people get to keep their jobs. So I think the impact on this is huge, but given that unemployment has already skyrocketed to over 5%, and the steep curve seems to be growing even faster over the last few months, I am really scared as to what's going to be happening when this support is pulled. And if it's not pulled, what that will mean for the economy through the rest of this year. The big question is, what will the government do on Wednesday? The primary objective, as they're saying, and which is the right thing, is to get the economy going so that, businesses can begin growing, so that people can go spend money. Stifling growth is the last thing that they'll want to do. And as a result, they're probably not going to be increasing some of the taxes that perhaps some people think they should. So although they've borrowed £300 billion or whatever it is and skyrocketed national debts to levels we have never seen, it seems quite unlikely that things like corporation tax will be touched in this budget, because although it's a very easy lever to pull, it probably will go against trying to help businesses grow, trying to seek investment in those businesses. So they're probably going to be touched for that reason. And for the same reason, they probably also won't touch VAT, because that probably will reduce the ability of those businesses to go and sell goods to people, etc., etc. So they probably won't be touching that as well. Now, specifically, the government has for a long time hinted at raising dividend tax so that it is equivalent to income tax, maybe just income tax, not income tax plus national insurance, but so that there isn't this discrepancy between people who are potentially better off being able to pay less, or people having the choice, say if you're a sole director of a business, being able to pay yourself via dividends rather than via PAYE, simply because that is a cheaper way of doing it. And I kind of agree. As a business owner, I think it's probably the right thing to do in the long term. So whether this is going to happen in this budget or not, we shall have to wait to find out. A lot of the media seems to agree that income tax brackets are going to be locked, with £12,500 being the 0% tax limit as it is at the moment, and $50,000 being the higher income tax bracket. So that probably won't change, which is unusual because it has been growing every single year, but that probably also makes a lot of sense. One leak recently suggested that the lifetime allowance on pensions might be frozen this year and maybe for some time, which is really interesting, because I literally made a video a few days ago where I talked about that lifetime allowance and how it is basically a lever for the government to be able to raise tax when they want to, and how people need to be somewhat careful about maybe putting too much money in their pension over their lifetime, because this kind of thing can happen. And naturally enough, here is a prime example. They've already actually reduced this allowance in the past. This can happen, and this may well happen in the future as well. So just something really important for people to be aware of. But as the government is looking to get businesses going, getting people out there to spend money, why not do a few things that actually encourage this behavior more directly via means that probably would actually work better? For example, the £20,000 ISA allowance in the UK is a massive white elephant in the room. I love it. I make use of ISA accounts, and I love the fact that I can go and invest essentially without having to pay any tax. However, nobody in a regular job job on a regular salary will ever be able to use the full £20,000 per year allowance. It is huge. It is way more than what would be reasonable for the vast majority of people to actually make use of. Cutting it is only ever going to affect people who are quite wealthy. I mean, wouldn't that make kind of a lot of sense to go and try to, raise revenue from people who are taking advantage of tax-free benefits that are only available to them because they are wealthy? Maybe that would make a lot of sense. Or maybe it doesn't if you're a millionaire who happens to be married to a billionaire. Anyway, national insurance is another option. Most of us pay 12% national insurance on earnings of up to £4,167 a month. But if you earn over that, so over £50,000 a year, you only have to pay 2% on the amounts over that, which doesn't seem to make much sense in a system where we pay progressive levels of tax. It means that if you add national insurance and income tax, which is basically the real income tax in this country, because national insurance doesn't actually do what people think it does, it's just a way of making the income tax look lower than it is. It just means that when you're earning less than £50,000, you're actually paying 32% in tax, but when you go up to the 50,000 threshold and beyond it, you're now earning 42%. So it's not quite as big a jump as maybe some people perceive and think, and maybe this will be a relatively obvious place to go and make an adjustment, however unpopular it might be with your wealthy mates. The last tax that the government is apparently looking at is capital gains. This is another one that seems to be disproportionately benefiting the wealthy, because capital gains for people earning over £50,000 is only 20%, which is much less than income tax, including national insurance, and also much less than dividend tax as well. So when you make a load of money on your investments or selling your second home, somewhere in the countryside, you don't have to pay too much tax, which is nice. Should this tax also equate the level of income tax? If you take a big step back, that probably would make a lot of sense, in the sort of grand scheme of things, but maybe it doesn't to some people. Anyway, let's wait and see what happens on Wednesday. Make sure you join me just before 12:30, which is when these things usually start. If you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit the bell, because that's how you'll get notified when that live stream starts. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys later.